non-fiction filmmaking is, especially if you're in the creative non-fiction bit of it, it honestly becomes seductive. It takes over your life in a way that I don't think fiction can. When you make a demo reel and pitch something and compete with projects internationally, it gives you kind of street cred, but it also gives you great, kind of like you feel emotionally bolstered, right, to soldier on. Hi, this is Shaunak, and I just had a conversation with Anupama Chopra. You can like, share, and subscribe to Film Companion on YouTube.
Air France presents Flying High at Cannes, a series in which we talk to some of the most accomplished Indian artists at the Cannes Film Festival.
Shaunak, first of all, congratulations on All That Breathes. It's a stunning film. It really moved me, and just the idea of you cannot differentiate between All That Breathes is so simple and so powerful. Well done.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful, wonderful movie that everyone should see. It's of course already won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance. It is the one film having a special screening, the one Indian film having a special screening here at Cannes. This film has created ripples around the globe. What is going through your head? How are you processing the success of this?
I mean, I'm not processing it, of course, because you only soak it in over time when, like, I was just telling a friend that for me, success is an email from a person you admire or a message from a director you admire. So I feel like I'm getting glimpses of it through these kinds of snatches. And that's the nicer, I mean, ultimately, the process is the reward. And the making of the film is when it's truly joyous. And this is a confetti on top. So of course, I mean, not to in any way diminish what it means, but this is all fantastic and we're all besides ourselves with joy, and hopefully it will get us a kind of visibility and constituency that is obviously not common for an Indian documentary. So in that way, it gives us a stage that I don't think most non-fiction from that part of the world gets. But, one has to have a kind of guarded optimism about how much one allows these things to make a home in your head.
You use that phrase all the time, guarded optimism.
Yeah.
Why are you so guarded? Why won't you just,
I mean, only so far as usually, and you're right, I shouldn't use, but funny enough, that term right now I wasn't using in the usual context. Usually I say it when people
about
say,
the documentary
do you
scene?
think the documentary scene is going to change?
Yes.
And of course one doesn't want to, reduce or undermine the moment.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not like from tomorrow we're going to have people in swaths watching documentary.
Sure.
So it's not like things are going to... But having said that, clearly something is changing. I mean, in the last year alone with Payal Kapadia's film, with Sushmita Rintu's Writing the Fire and so on, clearly, objectively, empirically, more is happening in the non-fiction end of things than there is in fiction.
Yeah.
I personally believe that there's also formal innovation in non-fiction than there is in fiction. So I'm more excited by the non-fiction world that's coming out. So in that way, of course, there's stuff to be happy about, not euphoric about, but happy about. So therefore, I feel like instead of just saying I'm on top of the moon in terms of what documentary practice is going to be, I'd rather say that,
It's guarded.
Yeah, but it's optimistic and it's sanguine.
That's a good thing.
But, yeah.
Shaunak, you've always been very clear that this film did not start out because you wanted to do something about air pollution. It started out with more of a sort of sense of textures and visuals and something sort of, not very clear in your head that you were looking to capture. Can you speak about that a little?
Yeah, but now that you pointed out stuff that I said in other places, I'm going to be conscious to not regurgitate any of those words. I think I was sure about what this film ought not to be. We were sure we didn't want to make a film on pollution per se. A lot of those films are didactic and or have a kind of maudlin sentimentality or are bleak in a way where, where it's not really having a conversation with the audience, but it's just not this kind of films that excite me. So for me, and also you don't really begin with a very concrete theme. It's usually a texture, it's really usually a
What do you mean by that? Can
I'll give you a
explain
sense.
how?
So, I mean, for anybody who's lived in Delhi, grayness is a very concrete, tangible thing, right? There's a air purifier that's running in most rooms. You feel like your lives are constantly coated and laminated by this thick grayness. The sun is this kind of diffused blot every time you look up. And this general sort of thing where, it's like the lungs of the air conditioner of spaceship Earth is sputtering and coughing. And you really have this sense of as if something is on the brink of, like something is going fatally wrong. And this is not something like that I'm saying I feel esoterically, or I feel like most people in Delhi have this sense of something foundationally apocalyptic in the 3 months between November to January. And so you get a kind of visual texture of what you feel. And essentially how it came initially was that whenever you're driving and you're stuck in traffic and you look up and you have these tiny, lazy dots gliding. And then every now and then when you see one of those dots falling, like I thought maybe the kite's falling. And then, you have this thing about the air itself becoming so opaque and noxious that the birds are falling off the sky. And then, of course, one starts researching this. The film actually, in a way, it also began. So I was in this fellowship kind of thing in the UK, in Cambridge, and I was basically surrounded by people who were working on the human animal as a kind of conceptual thing. So I got very interested in reading about it, and as I started reading more things about it, this sort of hypnotic love that some people have had, a kind of trans-species human bird love, I would find very, very interesting. And the best kind of literature when it comes to the non-human life is actually around birds. It's like S is for Hawk, The Peregrine, and these are monumental pieces of literature, and I was very moved by them. And that's how I started thinking of people or looking for people who have a deep or a profound relationship with the skies or the air. And the first people we met were the brothers themselves. And once you've gone into planet basement of the brothers and you've gone to this damp, derelict thing with industrial decay on one side, and on the other side there's these magisterial yet vulnerable birds being, healed.
It's amazing.
The sheer
The
salient
contrast.
bipolarity of that
Yeah,
space
yeah.
is the sort of thing that it's inherently cinematic. It's riveting
Correct.
because of, and so I started thinking. Then we all, when I say I mean the extended directorial team. We started thinking essentially of like the structure would be about extreme compression and extreme decompression. So to vacillate between that kind of a claustrophobic, tiny, stifled place and the vista of the city itself. And essentially, the brother's life, and it's very absurd. Like there's a kind of surreal element in that
It
house.
is, yeah.
You feel like they over time they sort of become a kind of symptom for a larger ecological and a social malaise, right? It's and they're clearly metaphors and much more. So that's how the film over time. And I'm saying this now only in retro, like with the advantage of hindsight, because when you're making a film, then it's like a free fall, right? You just like you get sucked in whole and like swallowed whole by the film. And then it's just about chasing the spine of what's happening every day. So that's how it took a life of its own.
One of the most sort of heartbreaking and memorable moments is when the brother says that the basement is so cramped that he thinks he's going to have a heart attack, and all these kites will come flying out of his heart. It's just such a wonderful emotion. Tell me, Shaunak, how did you arrive at the visual language of the film? How did you sort of arrive at that aesthetic of this very still camera, the long, continuous sequence, especially that opening? How did that sort of evolve?
Yeah. Can I just before that respond to the somberness of that line?
Yeah.
So the thing is that it's like your own life becomes fodder for the film that you're making, and usually one would think that holds true for fiction and not for documentary, but I think it's the same even with non-fiction. So basically last year I lost my dad, so I had a big personal loss, and what that does is that it kind of opens up a space for conversations even with documentary subjects where there's a different kind of register of tenderness and honesty and authenticity, where you're not just speaking as through the power differentials of director, filmmaker, subject. And the film didn't start out as being this somber or it wasn't tinged by what people now describe as a kind of slight melancholic sadness. So it was more front brain than other emotions. So, but what happens is that when you're going through something intense, those conversations also kind of open up, right? So the particular line that you mentioned about the chest exploding and kites coming out actually happened because they were also speaking in that kind of a syntax with me, So it's like a different kind of emotional thing that opens up. Visually, what happens is that in terms of the visual language, it sort of kept changing over time because the cinematographers kept changing.
Right.
But the
You
visual
were
language, but the visual language is the thing that I'm most excited by about this film, and I am also the most proud of. So if I was to extrapolate one thing that I think is a contribution to films, is the visual language. So it started off with, so we've all been a huge fan of this Russian filmmaker called Viktor Kosakovsky, who made Antipodas, Aquarella, and so on. And he has this thing about these monumental shots of which are just like composed through pans and these slow, languid tilts and so on. And I thought bringing that to bear upon this kind of a space where the inner sanctum of the story is the lives of the brother, but beyond that, you have to have something wherein you have a sense of human and non-human life sort of jostling together. So I thought that would be exciting. So we got in basically this German DP whose work I've been a fan of for a while, called Ben Bernhard, who shoots for Victor Koskos. He was actually coming the day after. So we had the great privilege of getting him. And then this other DP called Rijudas came and evolved that language. But essentially the idea was that to do something that was flowy and dreamy, but at the same time, it's like the film structure is the lives of the brothers, the inner sanctum. The outer sense is the shots of the animals themselves. So you have like shots which essentially show the simultaneity of non-human life and human life in the city. Yeah. So you have like 4-minute long sequences of the opening shot of the rats, turtles, pigs, blah blah blah. But he came up with this idea of essentially having one unit of a shot which is uncut. So a 3 minutes of a shot, and that would be composed by a kind of formula which would be that you'd have two elements, say an element of the city and the animal itself, which would sort of juxtapose within that shot, and it would be about the passage of time. So you're immersed in this world of rats for about 3 to 4 minutes. Yeah. You're seeing a turtle clamber through trash and look at traffic whizzing past, right? But you've been there with that animal for about 3 to 4 minutes. So that's what he developed. And then we sort of figured out this language of slow languid pans and, where essentially using tools of fiction cinema to tell a non-fiction story. So that was the idea, right? To like have those kinds of cinematic toys. So we've used tracks, cranes, etc., which are not usually used. So that's how the language came to be. That's how we began, and over time, we shot for 2.5 years. So you have time to orchestrate movements and so on.
But Shaunak, when you commit that kind of time, that kind of sort of just passion and energy to a project, and we know, especially prior to this year, which has been a breakthrough year for Indian documentary, but prior to this, it's so hard to find an audience. How do you keep the faith that this is important, I need to keep going?
It's still hard to find an audience, despite this being a breakthrough year. So, I'm guarded because of reasons such as that. Well, for one, 3 years would definitely seem long from the lens of fiction, but for as far as non-fiction goes, it's not that long actually. So in a way, you've sort of settled in for it to be a fairly long and necessarily arduous ride. But I think your question is also geared towards one's own emotional processes in terms of hunkering down and soldiering on, right? And obviously that doesn't have any simple answer, but I think many people begin with non-fiction because it's more hospitable than fiction is. And I've never worked in Bombay, never assisted anybody. And the behemoth that is Bombay honestly scares me. And non-fiction just seemed more hospitable as a practice to accommodate your ideas and to have a more personal language to filmmaking also. So that's how it began. And then the truth is that I think once non-fiction filmmaking is, especially if you're in the creative non-fiction bit of it, it honestly becomes seductive. It takes over your life in a way that I don't think fiction can, because in a way fiction has an instrumental quality to it. You hire people for a certain number of days. It's a 1 month shoot and then you're done. And here life isn't plotting. You're literally sitting and waiting. And that has incredibly moving moments of magic and poetry.
Yeah.
And the rare sense of goosebump inducing privilege that you are seeing a moment that nobody else in the world has, and you have caught it accidentally, and nobody else has seen it, and only you, because you were there with the camera and had decided that I am the epistemic wallpaper of these people's lives, is why you got it.
Yeah.
And the remarkable satisfaction of it is what I think drives you. But also, of course, you know that if you do well, it does break out and things become easy. But, it's a question about MBA kyun nahi kiya? Because, of course, you earn more and you do well. But, I mean, the process is the reward. And I mean this in the most non-trivial way. It's like, you do it because it's genuinely more fun in terms of the creative pains than anything else. But having said that, I do want to move into fiction as well.
Really?
Yeah. I'll tell you something. The thing about non-fiction is that at its heart, there is something which is a bit, I always say that the demon eyes of non-fiction make it difficult after a while to persist with it, because you're dealing with the stuff of people's lives. You really have to work hard on robust relationships with people.
Yeah.
The film will do well and people realize that their image is going out into the world and it has value. And then you work with the dynamics of, are the people's lives changing? And, it's a lot of responsibility and you have to constantly figure out the ethical compunctions of this thing. So the question of ethics in non-fiction is a really long and genuinely thorny, winding path. So, and while there's the philosophical pleasures that one derives from the process, but I feel a bit, it does sort of wear you out also. So I'm excited in doing fiction because I actually want to have a part of that instrumental sort of relationship with people also, in terms of, here's a month, people are on shifts, we're shooting this.
And would that would the fiction be in Bombay?
I don't think
Are you willing to engage, Shaunak?
I'm willing to engage, but I don't think it's about my will to engage. I doubt if that's I don't think those are the odds of the conversation. I'm fairly certain that we did a private screening in Bombay recently, and I have to say directors, especially the people who come, were very warm and encouraging, and for us especially because we're the entire crew's from Delhi.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever worked in a Bombay set, so we really villainize it in our heads. So it was very sweet to encounter that, and I just feel like if people are willing and open, then of course I'd love to engage. But I don't think anybody's sitting with their arms open. So with this film, of course, we have to raise money from different kinds of grants and producers abroad and a studio outside and so on. And that's also exciting because, when you make a demo reel and pitch something and compete with projects internationally, it gives you kind of street cred, but it also gives you great, kind of you feel emotionally bolstered, right, to soldier on. And I think there's something in it. So yeah, I'm completely open, of course, now. But it's a dark, unknown beast at the moment, and I don't have the skills at the moment to know if I can tame it.
Okay, tell me about All That Breathes being available to more than just the festival goers.
Right.
What's the plan for that? I think it's essential viewing.
Right.
How do people get to see it?
Right. So actually, this is something that I'm really excited about because with the previous film, Cities of Sleep, we couldn't really get it out immediately, and therefore it was restricted to becoming a more rarefied kind of a festival thing. With this film, now I'm actually certain it won't be the case. I can't, like, we're going to give the name, we're going to
You're announcing.
announce the name of the distributor in like 3-4 days from now.
Okay.
But
there is one.
Oh yeah, so I'm like very happy to say that there is a global distributor and a very
Superb.
revered, prestigious, to my mind, distributor. So it'll be widely available to anybody who wants to see in India and across the world.
That is fabulous. Congratulations. Like I said, essential viewing. Have a wonderful Cannes Festival.
Thank you.
Thank you.